Today marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where we are to extend our support to Emily and Sharon. My husband Matthew made the announcement during a phone call, his voice laced with a triumphant note. I was caught off guard, left speechless by his sudden pronouncement. It felt as though Matthew's entire world revolved around Emily and Sharon, and I was left questioning my place in his life and the value of our marriage. In response, I forced a cheerful tone, mentioning that their packages had arrived and sharing news of my recent move to a new place. The statement seemed to momentarily silence Matthew, his surprise evident. I'm Elizabeth, a 45-year-old sales professional at a leading firm. Despite the pressure from demanding clients, I find fulfillment in my job, having built long-standing relationships with many of them. Outside of work, my life is quiet. I often spend weekends at home, with Matthew being my closest family. My parents have passed away, and though my in-laws live nearby, our interactions are minimal. Matthew enjoys dining out and frequently invites his sister Emily and her daughter Sharon to join him. At first, I resented this preference for their company over mine, but over time, I began to understand the deeper reasons behind his actions. Emily and Sharon had faced hard times, living in a cramped, run-down apartment after the collapse of my father-in-law's business. Matthew's gratitude towards Emily runs deep, as it was her financial support during his education that allowed him to finish college despite the struggles they both faced. Learning more about their situation and Matthew's sense of indebtedness to Emily shifted my perspective. I chose to embrace understanding and let go of my complaints, recognizing his desire to give back to his sister and niece. Though it sometimes leaves me feeling isolated, I have come to accept it as a part of our life together. Matthew's loyalty to his family became even clearer when he shared the news of Emily's divorce and her decision to retain custody of Sharon. Emily has never been an easy person for me, especially after our first meeting when she openly criticized my appearance and style. Still, the latest developments have made me reflect on our family dynamics and my role within them. As Matthew continues to prioritize his sister and niece, I've resolved to support him, hoping that we can continue to uphold family unity despite the challenges. Matthew and his family chose to overlook Emily's rude behavior towards me, forcing me to endure it in silence. He later told me that he planned to visit his parents frequently, emphasizing Emily's fragility compared to my resilience, while expressing concern for Sharon. Despite the sting of his words, I held my tongue, realizing that arguing would only push Matthew further away. With a heavy heart, I simply bid him farewell. As time passed, Matthew's presence at home grew increasingly rare. He often didn't return to the well after midnight during the weekdays, and his weekends were entirely spent away, deepening my sense of isolation. Coming home to an empty, dark house confirmed his absence, exacerbating my loneliness. On the rare occasions when Matthew was home, his behavior became more difficult to tolerate. One day, he shocked me by demanding that I buy a designer bag as a housewarming gift for Emily, justifying it with the news of my upcoming bonus. I questioned the necessity of such a gift, suggesting that he should be the one to purchase it. This suggestion angered Matthew, who insisted that, since I had married into the family, it was my duty to extend such courtesies to Emily. His lecture on family manners lasted for an hour, ending with a stern reminder to ensure that Emily and Sharon received their gift. Afterward, he left, presumably to visit his parents. I quietly mourned the lack of reciprocity from Emily over the years, but her call a few days later only intensified my frustration. She expected a housewarming gift as though it was a given, despite never offering us such gestures in the past. I couldn't hold back my anger and reminded her of her absence of generosity, even pointing out the lack of a wedding gift from her side. Her response was dismissive, as though it were perfectly normal. She rationalized her behavior by claiming that family members didn't need to exchange gifts. She even bragged about buying an envelope for us, though it was empty, and had the audacity to complain about the quality of her wedding favors. Reflecting on Emily's sense of entitlement and complete lack of consideration left me speechless. Her brazen attitude at our wedding, paired with her complaints about the price of the gifts, was infuriating. But it was her final remark that stung the most. She saw me as the least important member of the family hierarchy, expecting me to cater to her demands without question. This interaction laid bare the imbalance in our family dynamics, forcing me to grapple with the unrealistic expectations placed on me simply because of my marital connection. I was completely taken aback by Emily's audacity. Before I could process her words, Sharon jumped in, demanding I buy her a bag from an exclusive Fifth Avenue store. She hung up with a dismissive laugh, further underscoring their entitled attitudes. Their expectations left me bewildered and frustrated. Why was I the one constantly burdened with such unreasonable demands? As I thought about it, I realized the situation at home was rapidly deteriorating. Matthew's visits became even rarer, and on the rare occasions he did come home, he began taking money from my wallet. When I protested, he justified his actions by claiming that since I was mostly at home, I wouldn't need the money. He insisted he'd use it for something worthwhile. His disregard for my feelings and finances was draining, and it seemed like the distance between us was growing ever wider. Then one day, a mover unexpectedly arrived at our doorstep, claiming to be there to move items for Matthew. I was left confused and anxious, unsure of what was happening next. I tried to explain that there must have been some mistake, but the mover insisted they had direct instructions from Matthew. Overwhelmed by the sudden influx of boxes, I called Matthew, only to overhear Emily and Sharon's laughter in the background. His response was a shock. He announced that the belongings for Emily and Sharon had arrived because from that day forward, we were going to support them. He dismissed my concerns outright, while Emily eagerly welcomed me to this new arrangement, suggesting that I should be happy to take care of Sharon, since we had no children of our own. Sharon's reaction was equally jarring. She expressed embarrassment at the thought of being associated with me. Stunned by Matthew's unilateral decision and the complete lack of consideration for my feelings, I began to question the viability of our marriage. Matthew's next statement only strengthened my resolve. He casually mentioned that more items and new furniture for Emily and Sharon were on their way, and that I would need to organize everything before their arrival. They would stay at their parents' house until then, leaving me alone to manage the chaos. Emily's laughter, imagining me handling the situation alone, was the final straw. The lack of respect and empathy from Matthew and his family was crystal clear. I was left to ponder the future of a marriage where I seemed like an afterthought, forced to accommodate and support people who showed no gratitude or consideration for my well-being. Sharon's bold demand for careful handling of her precious belongings pushed me to my breaking point, and I was itching to end the conversation with a curt, "All right." Without another word, I hung up, my heart a mix of frustration and determination. No sooner had I put down the phone than I sprang into action, ready to change my situation. 2 weeks later, Matthew called, eagerly inquiring about the additional baggage and whether I had organized everything. His voice carried an anxious tone, no doubt curious about the state of our home. With forced sweetness, I informed him that everything had arrived and that I had moved into a new place. I delivered the news with a deliberately cheerful tone, savoring the moment. Matthew's confusion was palpable. His stunned silence spoke volumes. Indeed, on the day Emily and Sharon's possessions arrived, I had already begun to take control of my own future. I didn't waste a moment. I rushed to a local real estate agency, determined to find a place to stay immediately. Despite the agency's initial hesitations, concerned about typical move-in procedures and ongoing renovations, my persistence paid off. I was shown a shared residence with secure entry, shared amenities, and utilities included, making it ready for me to move in right away. The fact that it came with cleaning services and furnished rooms made it even more appealing. After seeing the last available room, I decided on the spot it was perfect. When I called Matthew to break the news, his reaction was one of shock and disbelief. He couldn't grasp the idea of me moving out. He insisted that, as a married couple, my actions were absurd and demanded an immediate apology, urging me to return. In the background, Emily and Sharon's panicked and angry voices only added to the chaos. Matthew, in an attempt to assert control, threatened me with the consequences of a divorce, implying I would struggle to find someone else due to my age and appearance. Their cruel taunts were meant to demean me, but they only made me more resolute. In a twist, I confronted Matthew with knowledge of his affair. Caught completely off guard, his flustered response confirmed my suspicions. It was clear he had underestimated me. Despite his betrayal and the collective disrespect from him and his family, I stood my ground. I reminded them of the strength and independence they had overlooked. My decision to move out wasn't just about escaping their toxicity. It was about reclaiming my dignity and starting anew, free from their selfish demands and unkind judgments. I informed Matthew that I had enlisted the services of a private investigator. Given his frequent absences, I suspected he might be having an affair. My intuition was right. Within 5 days, the investigation was completed, revealing Matthew's daily rendezvous with his mistress after work. The times he claimed to be dining out with Emily and Sharon were merely a cover for his days off. The investigator had captured numerous photos of Matthew and his mistress, showcasing their intimacy. I couldn't help but reveal the truth with a mix of amusement and disbelief. The evidence collected painted a clear picture of Matthew's deceit, showing that the funds he had been extracting from my wallet were likely being used to finance his escapades. With photographic proof in hand, I made up my mind to divorce Matthew, determined to seek alimony from him, and perhaps from his mistress as well. I confidently informed Matthew of my plans, including the dispatch of a certified letter to both him and his mistress at their workplace. The affair would no longer remain a secret. When I visited a law firm with the evidence, even the attorneys seemed taken aback by the compelling case against Matthew. Matthew's reaction to the impending exposure was one of fury and disbelief, especially at the thought of his office colleagues learning of the affair through the certified letters. Emily's anxious inquiry into Matthew's well-being hinted at her deeper motives, as she had expected to live comfortably off her hard work while maintaining a leisurely lifestyle. Matthew's silence in response to Emily and Sharon's concerns only underscored his dilemma. He had not only betrayed me but had also jeopardized his financial stability and relationships. I pointed out to Matthew the likelihood of his financial ruin, as indicated by the investigator's report on his lavish spending on his mistress, including expensive gifts that hinted at potential debt. Emily and Sharon's outcry was loud and accusatory, berating Matthew for his actions and expressing their disdain for his choices. Despite Matthew's pleas for help in managing the fallout with Emily and Sharon, I stood firm in my decision to proceed with the divorce and demand appropriate alimony. I made it clear to Matthew that he needed to face the consequences of his actions on his own, emphasizing the urgency of addressing the situation before the certified letter made the affair public at his workplace. His frustration was evident, but I remained detached, focusing on securing a fair settlement and moving forward from the betrayal and deceit that had overshadowed our marriage. After ending the call, I chose to ignore his subsequent attempts to reach out, blocking any further calls from him. In my mind, Matthew and Emily were now on their own to navigate the mess they had created. My decision to divorce Matthew became final, especially after his initial reluctance to proceed due to the lifestyle we had maintained with our dual income. Matthew's realization that maintaining the same standard of living on his own was unrealistic seemed to drive his resistance. However, armed with undeniable proof of his infidelity, I firmly communicated my refusal to consider reconciliation and threatened legal action if he continued to oppose the divorce. Ultimately, Matthew reluctantly agreed and signed the divorce papers. With a heavy heart, I pursued alimony from him and sought compensation for emotional distress from his mistress. The settlement amounts were determined with guidance from my lawyer, ensuring fairness for all parties. Surprisingly, Matthew's mistress promptly paid her portion after borrowing the funds from her parents, who she had revealed the situation to. Matthew, on the other hand, struggled with the financial burden and repeatedly requested a reduction, which I firmly declined. During our lawyer meeting, I even suggested adding the money he had taken from my wallet to the settlement, visibly shaking him. In the end, Matthew reluctantly consented to the terms as they were. After the fallout, both Matthew and his mistress resigned from their company as the affair became public knowledge, likely triggered by the delivery of the certified documents related to our divorce. The mere origin of the envelopes sparked office gossip, creating an uncomfortable environment for Matthew, who eventually chose to leave his job. Now, Matthew struggles to find stable employment due to his age, while also managing alimony payments, ongoing mortgage obligations, and debts incurred from his affair, often working temporary day labor jobs. Occasionally, messages from Matthew reach me through our lawyer, filled with regret and pleas for reconciliation. He admits his wrongdoing and expresses how difficult life has become, wishing he had foreseen the consequences of his actions. Despite these messages, my path forward remains unchanged. Focus on rebuilding and moving on from a chapter that, while painful, has ultimately led to newfound independence and strength. Matthew, overwhelmed with regret, broke down in tears in front of our lawyer, lamenting how he should have treated me better. His realization came too late, and now he found himself in a dire situation, a predicament shared by Emily and Sharon, who were living with him despite his financial ruin. I had moved on, blocking Matthew's number to sever ties completely. Unexpectedly, a call from Emily slipped through, her number unblocked. Hesitantly, I answered, only to hear her immediate plea for help. She and Sharon were struggling, facing the imminent cutoff of their utilities and a lack of food. Her voice was weary, and desperation was clear. Yet my decision was firm. I had no obligation to rescue them from the consequences of their self-inflicted hardships. I suggested Emily find employment, reminding her of her ability to work. Sharon's interjection, harshly labeling me for not offering support despite my financial stability, was audacious. She even demanded that I take them in, a notion I found absurd. I clarified with finality that my divorce from Matthew made them strangers to me and that I wanted no further contact. Sharon's response was a mix of anger and entitlement, but I remained resolute. I ended the call and promptly blocked Emily's number, determined to permanently disconnect from their chaos. Their subsequent struggles, while unfortunate, were consequences of their own choices. I had embarked on a new chapter, moving out of the shared housing, not out of necessity, but to welcome a new companion into my life, a dog I met at an adoption event. This dog, unlike the others, seemed to choose me, its gaze locked onto mine in a moment filled with destiny. After multiple visits and a growing bond, I adopted the dog, which necessitated a move to a pet-friendly apartment. Dogs offer loyalty and joy that human relationships sometimes fail to provide, and my new home is now filled with the unconditional love of my dog, who eagerly responds to my call. Despite the challenges life may throw at us, I am no longer facing them alone. Together with my dog, I look forward to a future of mutual support and forward momentum, leaving the past and its turmoil behind.